There are moments when you find yourself agreeing without knowing why. Moments when you believe something, even though part of you wonders if it makes sense. And in those quiet pauses, you might realize the decision was not entirely yours. It was guided, shaped, played by forces you could not see. These are not the grand, obvious manipulations of history. They are the subtle games of psychology, the everyday tricks of perception and persuasion, woven into conversations, advertisements, even the glances of strangers. 60 of them, each with its own way of bending the mind, of pulling us toward choices we never meant to make, of making us feel that saying yes was our own idea all along. In the minutes ahead, we will walk together through these games, not to be afraid of them, but to recognize them, not to close ourselves off, but to understand how they move and how we may step aside when they try to pull us in. So while we begin, let your mind settle, let your breath soften, and simply observe. 1. Door in the face. Imagine this. You're walking down a busy street when a charity worker approaches. With a warm smile, they ask, "Would you be willing to donate $500 to help struggling families?" The number catches you off guard. It feels heavy, almost absurd. You hesitate, you apologize, and of course, you say no. But then, almost instantly, their tone softens. "That's completely understandable," they say. "Perhaps just $20 instead?" And suddenly, $20 feels light. It feels reasonable. And before you know it, your hand is already reaching into your pocket. What just happened? You have stepped into one of the most powerful compliance techniques in psychology. It is called the door in the face. The trick works by contrast. When faced with an extreme demand, we resist. But when that demand is lowered, our mind feels a subtle pressure to meet halfway, as if we now owe something, simply because the other side appeared to compromise. It happens in negotiations. A salesperson starts with an outrageous price, then generously drops it to the figure they wanted all along. It happens in interrogations. A detective threatens with a devastating charge before offering a lesser one that feels like mercy, but is still a trap. And on a darker scale, it appears in cults, in high control groups, in relationships that demand absolute loyalty. They begin by asking for the impossible, then pull back to something smaller, a little obedience, a small sacrifice, which suddenly feels manageable. And in that moment, you are already inside their game. So how do we defend ourselves? The key is this: compare every request to your own needs and standards, not to the anchor they have set for you. Ask, would this still feel fair if it were the very first request? Because once you recognize the game, the door they tried to shut in, your face quietly swings open again. 2. Foot in the door. One afternoon, a stranger knocks on your door. They ask a small favor. Would you be willing to place this tiny sticker in your window to show support for safe driving in your neighborhood? It feels harmless. You smile, nod, and agree. A sticker hardly changes anything, but a few weeks later, they return. This time, the request is different. Since you already support the cause, would you consider placing a large sign in your front yard? And suddenly, you find yourself saying yes, not because the sign is reasonable, not because you truly want it there, but because you already agreed to the first request and your mind whispers, I should stay consistent. This is the foot in the door technique. It works because once we commit, even in a small way, we feel a deep urge to appear consistent to ourselves and to others. Consistency is comforting. It feels like integrity. And so, one small step opens the door to much larger ones. Marketers know this well. A free trial, a single click, a tiny form filled out online. Each is just a sticker in the window. But once the foot is inside the door, it pushes further until you are all the way in. In relationships, it can be far darker. A manipulator may begin with harmless-seeming requests. Just spend more time with me. Don't talk to that friend as much. Little by little, the demands grow, and because you agreed before, you feel compelled to agree again. So how do we protect ourselves? By separating each decision from the last. Just because you said yes once does not mean you must keep saying yes. Pause and ask, if this request stood alone, without the one before it, would I still agree? Because sometimes the smallest door left open leads to the largest trap inside. 3. Lowballing. Picture this. You walk into a car dealership, excited, hopeful. The salesperson greets you warmly. And then, with a smile, they make an irresistible offer. This fully loaded car, only $20,000. It fits your budget. It feels like the perfect deal. You shake hands. Your imagination races. You see yourself behind the wheel, already driving down the road. But just before you sign the papers, the salesperson frowns, as if catching a mistake. I just checked with my manager. That price doesn't include some required fees. The real cost is $23,000. Your heart sinks, but instead of walking away, you nod, because in your mind, you already bought the car. You didn't just commit with money. You committed with your imagination, with your sense of identity, with the story of who you would be once it was yours. This is the lowball technique. It works by locking you into a decision before all the costs are revealed. Once you commit, backing out feels like a loss, even if the terms have changed. And it isn't just sales. A recruiter promises a dream job with high pay, only later to add long hours and hidden responsibilities. A manipulative partner invites you into something small, then slowly raises the stakes until you're giving far more than you ever agreed to at the start. So how do you protect yourself? Make it a rule. Never decide until every detail is on the table. Ask for the full cost in time, in money, in freedom, and remind yourself you are not bound by the promise you made before you had the truth, because a deal that hides its price was never truly a deal. 4. That's not all. You're watching a late-night commercial. The announcer's voice is bright, enthusiastic. This incredible blender can be yours today for only $40. You hesitate. $40 is still a choice to consider. But before your mind can weigh the decision, the voice continues. And that's not all. If you call right now, we'll include a recipe book, 2 travel cups, and free shipping. Suddenly, the offer feels too good to pass up. You weren't just buying a blender anymore, you were being gifted extras. And in that rush of generosity, you feel an invisible push. I should take it now. This is the "that's not all" technique. It works by stacking benefits, piling one advantage after another to overwhelm the part of the brain that hesitates. The secret is reciprocity. When someone adds a little extra, our minds feel as though they've done us a favor. And when someone does us a favor, we feel pressure to respond in kind, to say yes, to buy, to comply. It is the same with limited time bonuses, the extra perks in a sales pitch, the free gifts that make us act before we think. Each layer creates urgency. Each bonus makes refusal feel ungrateful. So how do we protect ourselves? Pause. Give yourself a full day before saying yes to anything that feels like a bargain only because of the extras. Ask, if there were no free gifts, would I still want this? Because often, the words, "that's not all," are not generosity at all. They are the first threads in a net designed to pull you in. 5. Bait and switch. You see an advertisement in the morning paper, a brand new television, top of the line for half the usual price. It feels like a once-in-a-lifetime deal. Excited, you drive to the store. But when you arrive, the shelf is empty. A clerk shrugs apologetically. That model sold out just this morning. But we do have this newer one with extra features, only a little more expensive. Your mind hesitates. You came for the first television, but now, with time already spent, with desire already lit, you begin to consider the pricier option. And soon enough, you walk out carrying something you never intended to buy. This is the bait and switch. It works by anchoring your expectations with an irresistible offer, the bait, and then quietly pulling it away, replacing it with a different, more costly choice. The power of the trap lies in momentum. You have already committed your time, your effort, your anticipation, and that makes it harder to walk away. It's not just in sales. A manipulative partner might promise freedom, but later impose control. A recruiter might advertise one set of benefits, then switch the terms once you are already invested. So how do we defend ourselves? Hold tight to your original criteria. If the deal is gone, ask yourself, would I still want this new option if I had seen it first? And most importantly, be willing to walk away. Because often, the only real power you hold in such a game is the power to leave. 6. Decoy effect. You're standing at the counter of a movie theater. The clerk points to the menu, a small popcorn for $3, a large for $7, and in between, a medium for $6.50. You hesitate. The medium feels too close in price to the large, and suddenly, the large looks like a bargain. You walk away with a bucket so big you can barely hold it. This is the decoy effect. The medium popcorn was never meant to be sold. It was placed there as bait, a deliberately unattractive option that makes the more expensive choice appear reasonable. Marketers use it everywhere. Magazine subscriptions with a pointless print-only option to push you toward the higher-priced bundle. Restaurant menus that add an overpriced dish to make the second most expensive look safe. Our minds rarely judge value in isolation. We compare side by side, and the comparison can be designed. The decoy is not for you to choose. It is for you to ignore so that the real target shines brighter. So how do we defend ourselves? Stop comparing package to package. Step back and ask, what do I actually need? What is the value to me on its own? Because once you see the decoy for what it is, its power vanishes, and you can walk away with exactly what you wanted. No more, no less. 7. Anchoring. Imagine walking into a luxury store. The first thing you see is a gleaming watch. Its price tag reads $10,000. Your mind gasps. The number lodges itself deep inside you, like a stake driven into the ground. Moments later, a second watch is placed before you. This one is only $2,000. Suddenly, it feels reasonable, even cheap, and yet $2,000 is still a vast sum. This is the anchoring effect. Our minds crave reference points. We rarely judge value on its own. We judge it against the first number, the first idea, the first anchor placed before us. Marketers know this. That's why menus show the most expensive item first. That's why negotiators begin with outrageous offers. Even if you never accept the anchor, it pulls your sense of normal closer to its weight. And it goes far beyond prices. An employer opens salary talks with a low figure, and your counteroffer bends toward it. A manipulator sets expectations sky high, and anything less feels like kindness. So how do we defend ourselves? By setting our own anchors before they are set for us. Decide the value you are willing to pay. Know the standards you will not cross. Carry them like your own compass. So when a foreign anchor is dropped, you do not drift with its pull. Because in the end, the strongest anchor is the one you choose yourself. 8. Contrast principle. You walk into a clothing store. The salesperson greets you warmly and leads you straight to the most expensive suit in the shop. It costs $3,000. You run your hand across the fabric, you glance at the price tag, and deep inside, a voice whispers, "Far too much." But then, the salesperson shows you another suit. This one is $1,200. Compared to the first, it feels almost modest. Suddenly, what once seemed expensive now feels acceptable. This is the contrast principle. Our brains rarely judge things in isolation. We measure one option against another, and the difference between them shapes our sense of value. It's why real estate agents show you a broken down house first, so the next one feels perfect. It's why luxury stores place the highest priced items at the front to make the rest seem reasonable by comparison. The danger is simple. You end up choosing not what is right for you, but what seems less extreme than the first option. So how do we defend ourselves? Evaluate each choice on its own terms. Forget the lineup. Forget the order in which it was presented. Ask, if I had seen only this without anything beside it, would it still feel right? Because in the quiet space where each option stands alone, truth has a chance to speak more clearly. 9. Priming. You walk into a store. Soft classical music plays in the background. Strings, gentle, elegant. Without noticing, your pace slows. Your gaze lingers on the finer things. The polished shoes, the tailored suits, the wine on the higher shelf. Later, you leave with a bill far larger than you had planned. Or picture this, a simple psychology experiment. Participants are given a list of scrambled words. Hidden among them are terms like old, retired, wrinkled. Minutes later, the participants walk down the hallway, and unconsciously, their steps become slower. This is priming. Our brains are always searching for patterns, connecting what we've just seen or heard to what comes next. A single word, a sound, even a color can plant a seed in the subconscious, guiding thoughts, emotions, and actions without us ever realizing. Marketers play this game constantly. Bright red tags trigger urgency. Soft scents in a shop suggest luxury. Even the design of a website, rounded corners, calming blues, can nudge you toward trust and compliance. So how do we protect ourselves? By noticing the context that surrounds us. Pause before deciding and ask, what cues are being placed here? What music, what words, what colors are whispering to me right now? Because once you bring the whisper into awareness, its power begins to fade, and the choice becomes yours again. 10. Pacing and leading. You sit across from someone in conversation. They lean back, so do you. They speak slowly, and you find yourself slowing down too. Then they say words that mirror your own feelings. I know it's been overwhelming lately. I understand how exhausting it feels. You nod, you feel seen, you feel understood. And then comes the shift. Since I know what you're going through, trust me, this is the step you should take. This is pacing and leading. First, they pace you, matching your rhythm, your posture, your emotions, until you feel a subtle harmony. Once you relax into that harmony, they begin to lead, changing the direction, inviting you to follow, as if the suggestion comes from within you. It can be harmless. A good teacher paces a restless class, then leads them into focus. A therapist mirrors emotions, then guides toward healing. But in the wrong hands, it is a form of manipulation. A leader who claims, "I know your pain," may then push you toward obedience. A manipulator in a relationship first mirrors your struggles, then bends you into choices you never wanted. So how do we protect ourselves? Notice when someone reflects your feelings too perfectly. Notice when agreement flows so smoothly that it feels rehearsed. And when advice comes right after perfect empathy, pause and ask, is this truly my direction, or am I just being led? Because not every mirror we face is meant to show us ourselves. Some are placed to guide us somewhere else entirely. 11. Suggestive language and hypnosis. You sit down at a restaurant. The waiter smiles and asks, "Would you like steak or seafood tonight?" It feels like a simple question. But notice what just happened. You were never asked whether you wanted to order, only which dish you would choose. The frame was set for you, and without thinking, you slip inside it. This is the power of suggestive language. The words we hear shape the boundaries of our decisions. A narrow frame makes us feel free, while silently removing other paths. And in darker settings, suggestion can be planted deeper still. A hypnotist tells a subject, "You might begin to feel your eyelids heavy now," and the body responds as if it were its own idea. Or in chilling psychological studies, children were told, "Do you remember the time you got lost in the shopping mall?" And with repetition, many began to recall an event that never happened at all. Our memories, our choices, can be nudged and bent by the way questions are asked. "Why are you upset?" assumes you are upset. "When did you agree?" assumes you already had. Language slips past our defenses because it feels like simple conversation. So how do we defend ourselves? By stepping outside the frame. Answer with your own intent, not the options given. When asked, "Steak or seafood?" you can smile and say, "Actually, I'm not hungry." When a question assumes something untrue, name it rather than accept it. Because the most powerful suggestion is only as strong as the silence of the one who receives it. 12. Foot in the mouth. The phone rings. On the other end, a cheerful voice asks, "How are you doing today?" Feeling good? You smile, maybe without thinking, and answer, "Yes, I'm doing fine." And almost instantly, the real request appears. That's wonderful to hear. Since you're in a good mood, would you be willing to answer a short survey? It will only take a few minutes. You pause. It feels harder to say no now, because you've already claimed you were fine, already opened the door with a smile. This is the foot in the mouth technique. By starting with a warm, personal question, the speaker creates a moment of connection, a sense of friendliness, and more importantly, a sense of consistency. If you just said you were feeling good, to refuse a simple favor would clash with that image. Your mind whispers, be consistent, be polite. Marketers, fundraisers, even casual manipulators use this gentle hook. A question about your day? A compliment? A small opening line? And then the true request slips in behind it. So how do we protect ourselves? By separating courtesy from commitment. A polite answer does not obligate you. You can say, "I'm well, thank you," and still decline the favor. Kindness in greeting does not require surrender in action. 13. Power of touch. A waiter places your drink on the table. As they set it down, their hand brushes lightly against your arm. Just a fleeting touch, almost accidental. Later, when the bill arrives, you notice yourself leaving a tip a little higher than usual. This is the power of touch. Even the lightest physical contact can create a sense of warmth, a feeling of closeness, a subtle trust that wasn't there before. Psychologists have found it again and again. A gentle tap on the shoulder, a handshake held a moment longer, a brief touch on the hand. All of them increase compliance, make people more likely to agree, to say yes, to give more. Of course, touch can be genuine. A comforting hug from a friend, a steady hand on your back in a moment of fear. These are among the most human of gestures, but in the wrong hands, touch becomes a tool. A salesperson who grazes your arm to make their offer feel warmer. A manipulator who uses casual contact to plant a false sense of intimacy. So, how do we protect ourselves? By noticing. When a touch feels out of place, ask yourself, is this real comfort? Or is it a lever? Recognize that the warmth you feel may be manufactured. And let your decisions rest not on that fleeting gesture, but on what truly matters to you. Because sometimes the smallest touch is less about connection and more about control. 14. Social proof. You scroll through an online store. One product catches your eye, and right beneath it, a glowing message appears. Bestseller. Chosen by thousands. You pause. Maybe you didn't plan to buy it, but the thought sneaks in. If everyone else picked this, maybe I should too. This is the pull of social proof. When we are uncertain, we look to the crowd for guidance. The choices of others become shortcuts in our own minds. If many people approve, it must be safe. It must be good. It must be right. Marketers lean on it heavily. Reviews, ratings, bestseller tags, lines of people outside a restaurant. Politicians draw on it too, building momentum by showing rallies, by amplifying the voices of agreement. And in darker corners, cults and high control groups thrive on social proof. If everyone around you obeys, if everyone praises the leader, it feels dangerous to resist. The silence of dissenters becomes invisible, and conformity feels like survival. So how do we protect ourselves? By separating the crowd from the self. Ask, is this choice truly right for me? Or does it only feel right because others are doing it? Notice when numbers and voices are being used as pressure, and remember, the path of the many may be easy, but it is not always your own, because sometimes everyone else is simply the bait, and you are the one being invited to follow. 15. Authority bias. A man in a white lab coat appears on screen. He speaks with confidence, his title displayed beneath his name: doctor, specialist, expert. You don't know who he is. You don't know if his words are true. And yet, because of the coat, the stage, the title, his message feels more trustworthy. This is authority bias. We are wired to trust symbols of power, uniforms, titles, positions. They make us lower our guard, accepting words without demanding proof. Marketers know this well, so do politicians. And in history's darkest pages, this bias has led entire societies to follow orders they would otherwise resist. So how do we protect ourselves? By asking one simple question: where is the independent evidence? Because authority may wear many costumes, but truth does not need a uniform. And so we close the first set of games, techniques that aim at our silent yes, the quiet nod of compliance. But persuasion does not always stop at agreement. In many cases, it reaches deeper, straight into the tender center of emotion. Meanwhile, let us step forward into the next chapter, the games that play with the heart. 16. Hoovering. You've decided to leave. The relationship has drained you, and for the first time, you feel a little distance, a little freedom. And then, the messages begin. I miss you. I can't live without you. Or, after all we've been through, how can you walk away now? Sometimes soft, sometimes angry, but always pulling, always drawing you back into orbit. This is called hoovering, named after the vacuum cleaner that sucks everything back in. It is the cycle of push and pull. One moment, rejection, coldness, cruelty, silence. The next, a flood of affection, apologies, promises, enough to spark hope, enough to make you think, maybe this time will be different. But it isn't different. It is a tactic, a loop designed to keep you tied, never fully leaving, never fully free. So how do we protect ourselves? First, by naming it for what it is, a strategy, not a transformation. Second, by setting the hardest boundary of all, no contact, because as long as the vacuum reaches you, it will keep pulling. Freedom begins not with their apology, but with your recognition that the cycle is not love. It is control. 17. Love bombing. At first, it feels like magic. A new person enters your life, and suddenly you are bathed in light. They flood you with compliments. You're perfect. I've never met anyone like you. They shower you with gifts, texts every hour, attention so constant it feels unreal. And for a moment, you believe, this must be love, this must be fate. But then, it changes. The flood slows to a trickle, the warmth turns cold, and you find yourself chasing, wondering what you did wrong, trying desperately to earn back the affection that once flowed so easily. This is love bombing. It is not love at all, but a weapon of control. The intensity at the beginning is designed to hook you, to make you dependent on the highs, so that when they pull it away, you ache for its return. And in that ache, you become easier to control. So how do we protect ourselves? By watching the clock, not the fireworks. Real love builds slowly, proves itself with consistency, not with a blinding burst that vanishes overnight. Ask yourself, is this affection steady across time? Or is it just an opening act meant to bind me? Because true love whispers, it does not shout, and it does not disappear the moment you reach for it. 18. Gaslighting. Imagine this. You recall a conversation clearly, the exact words, the tone, the moment. But when you bring it up, the other person smiles faintly and says, "You're remembering wrong. That never happened." You hesitate. A shadow of doubt creeps in. Maybe you did mishear. Maybe your memory is flawed. And over time, it happens again. You're too sensitive. You're imagining things. Everyone else sees it. Why can't you? This is gaslighting, a deliberate twisting of reality until you begin to doubt your own senses, your own memory, even your own mind. It is one of the most insidious forms of manipulation because it doesn't just challenge what you believe, it corrodes your trust in yourself. Once that trust is broken, you may cling to the very person who is deceiving you, relying on their version of reality while losing your own. Gaslighting appears in abusive relationships, in toxic workplaces, in political rhetoric that tells whole groups of people, what you see, what you feel is not the truth. So how do we defend ourselves? By keeping a record, journals, messages, timelines, anchors to reality that cannot be so easily erased, and by leaning on trusted third parties, voices outside the manipulator's reach. Because when someone tries to rewrite your reality, the greatest act of resistance is to hold on to your own. 19. Trauma bonding. At first, there's kindness, a gentle word, a gift, a moment of warmth. It feels safe. It feels like love. Then suddenly, the storm. Criticism sharp enough to wound, silence that freezes, rage that leaves you trembling. And just when you think you cannot take more, the warmth returns. Apologies, affection, promises, a flood of tenderness that soothes the pain they caused. This cycle repeats, kindness, cruelty, kindness again, until your heart no longer separates the two. The pain becomes tied to the comfort, the fear woven into the relief. You cling harder, not because of love, but because of the desperate hope that the kindness will return and stay this time. This is trauma bonding. It is the powerful attachment that forms when abuse is laced with intermittent reward. The very person who wounds you becomes the only one who can soothe you. And in that paradox, control is born. So how do we defend ourselves? Not by focusing on isolated moments, the one sweet apology, the one tender day, but by stepping back, seeing the larger pattern, and naming it for what it is. Because love does not need cruelty to prove itself, and any bond that thrives on harm and repair is not love at all. It is a cage, painted to look like shelter. 20. Zeigarnik effect. A story begins, a mystery is laid before you, but just as the answer draws near, the screen fades to black. To be continued. Your mind does not let go. It replays, it wonders, it aches for resolution. This is the Zeigarnik effect. Our brains cling to unfinished tasks, open questions, incomplete endings. Loose threads pull at our attention, demanding to be tied. Marketers know it. Television thrives on it. Cliffhangers hold us in place, hungry for the next episode, the next click, the next scroll. But the effect reaches darker realms too. A manipulator promises, "I'll explain later." A toxic boss dangles promotion just out of reach. An interrogator hints at evidence never revealed, keeping you caught in a cycle of anticipation, waiting, waiting, waiting. The power lies not in the answer, but in withholding it. Your mind becomes the leash, tugging you forward, chained to the hope of closure. So how do we defend ourselves? By giving closure to ourselves. Write down what is unfinished. Name it, conclude it, even if only with a temporary decision. I will revisit this on Tuesday. Mark an endpoint instead of letting it haunt you open-ended. Because once you close the loop, even imperfectly, the grip of the Zeigarnik effect begins to fade. 21st, scarcity. Imagine you are browsing an online store. A jacket catches your eye. Simple, elegant, exactly your style. You're not sure if you should buy it. And then, just beneath the price, the words appear. Only 2 items left in stock. Suddenly, hesitation melts into urgency. It feels like the choice has shifted. You are no longer deciding whether you want the jacket. You are deciding whether you are willing to lose it. This is scarcity at work. The human mind equates rarity with value. Gold, diamonds, collectibles. We've been trained across centuries to treat the scarce as precious. When something feels limited, it creates a pulse of fear inside us. If I don't act now, it will slip away. Marketers know this better than anyone. That's why you see timers ticking down, emails screaming, "last chance," and shelves labeled with only 3 left. The scarcity doesn't just sell the product, it sells the fear of missing out. But scarcity extends far beyond shopping. In relationships, a manipulative partner may withhold affection, offering warmth only in rare doses. The rarity makes each crumb feel like a feast, and so you cling, desperate for the next offering. In workplaces, leaders dangle promotions, noting how rare such opportunities are. You begin to overwork, fearing this may be your only shot. And in politics or propaganda, scarcity is woven into the narrative of survival. There are limited resources. Only those who follow us will be protected. Scarcity, mixed with fear, can drive entire groups to surrender freedoms they might otherwise defend. So how do we defend ourselves? By changing the question. Not, what if I miss out? But, do I truly need this at all? Pause before reacting to the countdown. If the product, the opportunity, the relationship holds real value for you, it will still matter tomorrow. And if it only shines when paired with a timer or a threat of loss, perhaps it is not worth your grasp at all. Because true worth does not vanish at midnight, and anything that does was never meant to anchor your life. 22. Loss aversion. Imagine this. You open your wallet and discover you've lost $100. A sharp pang rises in your chest, a sinking feeling that clings for hours, maybe days. Now imagine the opposite. You stumble upon $100 lying on the street. You feel a spark of joy, a rush of fortune. But notice, it fades much faster. Psychologists tell us this is no accident. The pain of losing is felt about twice as strongly as the pleasure of gaining the same amount. This is loss aversion. Our minds are built to protect what we already have, and so, when choices are framed around what we might lose, we become cautious, reactive, even irrational. Marketers know this intimately. You'll miss out if you don't act now. Cancel today and you'll lose all your progress. Gym memberships, subscriptions, insurance plans, all quietly remind you not of what you gain, but of what you stand to lose. In relationships, the same lever is pulled. A manipulative partner may whisper, "If you leave me, you'll lose everything we've built." The fear of loss overshadows the hope of freedom. In workplaces, leaders play the game. Take this project, or you'll fall behind your peers. The prospect of slipping backward feels more terrifying than any promise of reward. And in politics, fear of loss is among the most powerful tools of control. Their arrival means you will lose your jobs. The new law will take away your rights. The fear of losing what feels like yours can drive people into choices they would never make in calm reflection. So how do we defend ourselves? By reframing the scale. When faced with a decision, lay the loss and the gain side by side. Ask, if this were presented in reverse, what I might gain instead of lose, would I feel differently? By creating symmetry in our own minds, we loosen the grip of fear, because often it is not the loss itself that traps us, but the shadow it casts, larger, darker than it truly is. 23rd, placebo and nocebo. A doctor hands you a small white pill. "You'll feel better after this," they say gently. You swallow it, trusting. And hours later, the pain eases, the symptoms fade, and your body begins to recover. But here's the twist. The pill was only sugar. It held no medicine, no chemical cure. And yet, your mind, expecting relief, had reached into the body and created healing of its own. This is the placebo effect. Belief itself becomes medicine. The mind whispers to the body, and the body listens. But there is a darker mirror, the nocebo effect, when suggestion plants the seed of harm and the body answers in kind. You may feel dizzy after this. You might develop nausea. And soon enough, the dizziness and nausea arrive, not from the substance itself, but from the expectation of suffering. These effects reveal a profound truth. The stories we believe about our health shape the reality of how we feel. Marketers exploit this truth too. A supplement wrapped in promises of vitality may work, not through chemistry, but through belief. A brand tells you their cream removes wrinkles, and the expectation etches its own result. Manipulators too can plant nocebo seeds. Without me, you'll fall apart. If you leave, you'll get sick, you'll fail, you'll break. Words alone can tilt the balance of body and mind. So how do we protect ourselves? By seeking trustworthy sources of knowledge, medical, scientific, independent, and by noticing when expectation itself is being manipulated. Ask, is this effect from the thing itself or from the story I've been told about it? Because the mind is powerful. So powerful it can heal or it can harm, all depending on the seeds it has been given. 24. Framing. You stand in the grocery aisle comparing two labels. One package of beef reads 90% lean. Another reads 10% fat. The numbers are the same, the truth identical. And yet, your mind leans toward the one that sounds healthier, lighter, cleaner. This is the framing effect. The way information is presented, its frame, shapes how we feel about it. We rarely see facts as bare facts. We see them wrapped in words, and words carry weight. Marketers master this art. A product is not expensive, it is premium. A fee is not a penalty, it is a protection plan. Politicians wield it too. A war is not called invasion, but liberation. A tax is not a burden, but a contribution. The frame does not change the reality, but it changes the way reality lands in our hearts. Even in personal relationships, framing bends perception. I'm not controlling, I just care about you. It's not punishment, it's discipline. By shifting the frame, harm can be dressed as love, restriction as safety. So how do we defend ourselves? By flipping the frame. Take the sentence as given, then rewrite it in its opposite form. 90% lean becomes 10% fat. Contribution becomes burden. And in the contrast, the truth emerges more clearly. Because reality is not in the frame, it is in the picture inside it. And when we learn to see beyond the borders of words, we begin to choose with clearer eyes. 25. Emotional contagion. The room is calm. People speak in steady tones, papers shuffle, conversations flow. And then, one person gasps. Their voice rises, sharp with panic. Eyes widen, breath quickens, and almost instantly, the calm dissolves. Others begin to fidget. Voices climb, hearts beat faster. Nothing in the room has changed, except one person's state of mind. And yet, the emotion has spread like fire. This is emotional contagion. We are wired to mirror each other, to pick up subtle cues in voice, posture, breath. Joy, fear, anger, excitement, all can ripple through a group without a single word explaining why. Marketers and entertainers tap into this daily. The laugh track on a sitcom nudges you to smile. Crowds cheering in a stadium ignite your own excitement. A hype atmosphere at a product launch makes you believe you are witnessing history. But in darker spaces, emotional contagion becomes manipulation. A leader stirs anger, and soon the entire crowd burns with it. A manipulator feigns helplessness, and guilt spreads through those nearby. The emotion does not have to be yours, but it becomes yours if you do not notice. So how do we defend ourselves? By returning to the rhythm of our own body. When panic rises around you, pause, breathe slowly, feel the ground beneath your feet. Ask, is this truly my feeling, or am I simply catching what is in the air? Because emotions are like weather. They pass through groups. They shift the climate of a room. But you are not the weather itself. You are the one who chooses whether to stand in the storm or to find your own clear sky within. 26. Halo effect. A candidate walks into the room for an interview. They are well dressed, confident, with a radiant smile. Before they've spoken a single word, something inside you leans toward them. You find yourself thinking, they must be competent. They must be trustworthy. This is the halo effect. A single positive trait, beauty, charm, confidence, spills over, coloring the way we see everything else about a person. Marketers thrive on this bias. A celebrity's good looks become the reason we buy a perfume. An athlete's skill on the field is transferred onto a pair of sneakers. The glow of one quality makes the entire product shine brighter. In workplaces, the halo effect shapes careers. The charismatic speaker is assumed to be a strong leader, even if their decisions lack wisdom. The attractive employee is judged more capable, while quieter talent remains unseen. In relationships, the danger deepens. Charm can disguise cruelty. Confidence can mask manipulation. A single shining quality blinds us to shadows that stand right beside it. So how do we defend ourselves? By slowing down our judgments. Separate the trait that shines from the whole picture of who or what stands before you. Ask, if I remove the smile, the confidence, the beauty, what remains? Because true worth is not carried in a glow. And sometimes the brightest light is the very thing that hides the truth. 27. Barnum effect. You open a horoscope in the newspaper. The words seem to leap off the page. You have a deep need for love and approval. You sometimes doubt yourself, yet you carry hidden strengths that others admire. Your breath catches. That's me, you think. How could they know me so well? But here's the truth. The words could describe almost anyone. They are broad enough to fit most lives, yet specific enough to feel intimate. This is the Barnum effect. Our tendency to accept vague general statements as if they were crafted just for us. Fortune tellers, horoscopes, personality quizzes, self-help slogans, all lean on this effect. Sometimes you feel uncertain about the future. You want to be loved for who you truly are. Who could deny these lines? And yet, wrapped in the right tone, they feel like revelations. Marketers wield it too. Designed for people who value quality and care about their family. Who doesn't want to be that person? The Barnum effect flatters us into believing a message is personal, when in fact, it is designed to capture everyone. In relationships, manipulation can hide here as well. I know you. You're not like the others. You have a soft heart, and sometimes people take advantage of it. Such lines bypass skepticism because they stroke identity, the place where we most want to be seen. So how do we defend ourselves? By asking for details. What is specific, verifiable, testable? If a statement feels too true, pause and check. Could this apply to almost anyone? Because real insight is sharp, precise enough to risk being wrong. Vagueness dressed as truth is not a mirror. It is smoke. 28. Cognitive dissonance amplification. You've spent months in a project. The hours stretch long into the night. You've invested energy, money, pride. But slowly, the cracks begin to show. The results don't match the promise. The numbers don't add up. A quiet voice inside whispers, "This isn't working." And yet, walking away feels unbearable. Because if you stop now, it would mean admitting the effort was wasted. And so, instead of pulling back, you push harder. You invest more. You cling to the belief, "I must have been right all along." This is cognitive dissonance amplification. When reality threatens our sense of being consistent, we bend our perception to protect ourselves. The greater the investment, the stronger the need to justify it. Marketers know this well. Free trials hook you with time invested, so that canceling feels like losing what you've already put in. Scammers stretch promises, knowing the longer you stay, the harder it is to admit you were deceived. Relationships can fall into the same spiral. A partner repeatedly hurts you, but you tell yourself, "I've already given years of my life. It must mean something. I can't leave now." And at the darkest scale, entire movements or institutions bind people with this trap. Once someone has sacrificed reputation, money, even family ties, the cost of admitting error grows so heavy that doubling down feels easier than breaking free. So how do we defend ourselves? By remembering a simple rule: sunk costs equal zero. What you've spent, time, money, effort, is already gone. It does not change the value of the choice before you now. When facing a decision, ask only, "If I were starting fresh today, with no history behind me, would I still choose this?" Because true strength is not in justifying the path you've walked, but in choosing the right step forward, no matter how far you've already gone astray. 29. Pygmalion effect. A teacher looks at a classroom of students. Before the year begins, she is told, falsely, that a few children in front of her are gifted, likely to excel far beyond their peers. She doesn't realize it, but her voice softens with them. Her patience lengthens. Her encouragement grows warmer. And by the year's end, those children truly do perform higher, not because they were special to begin with, but because they were expected to be. This is the Pygmalion effect. High expectations, spoken or unspoken, shape behavior, lifting performance toward the level believed possible. It is the gentle push of belief. The coach who says, "I know you can do this," and suddenly the athlete runs faster. The mentor who assumes your brilliance, and so you rise to meet it. But expectation is not always kind. It can also crush. When someone imposes their vision of you, "You will succeed in this career, you will carry this family's dreams, you must live up to this standard," their belief becomes a cage, forcing you to perform not for yourself, but for their script. So how do we defend ourselves? By learning to set our own expectations, to harness the uplifting power of belief without being trapped by the projections of others. Ask, whose vision am I living toward, mine or theirs? Because expectation is powerful. It can build, it can bind, and the truest strength comes not from rejecting expectation altogether, but from choosing the ones that let you grow without losing yourself. 30F, OG, fear, obligation, guilt. A friend calls you late at night. Their voice is heavy, dramatic. "If you don't help me right now, I don't know what I'll do. And if you turn me away, what kind of friend would that make you?" Fear fills your chest. Obligation pulls at your heart. And guilt sharpens the edge of hesitation. Before long, you're already moving, not out of choice, but out of pressure. This is FOG, fear, obligation, and guilt. It is the manipulator's trinity, the three strings most often pulled to steer another person's will. Fear whispers, something bad will happen if you say no. Obligation presses, you owe me for what I've done. Guilt accuses, if you refuse, you are selfish, unkind, cruel. Together they create a fog, thick enough to cloud your vision, heavy enough to suffocate free choice. We see it in toxic relationships, where love is replaced by guilt trips and threats. We see it in workplaces, where employees are told they should be grateful and accept endless demands. We see it in cults and high-control groups, where members are bound not by joy, but by fear of punishment, obligation to leaders, and guilt toward the community. So how do we defend ourselves? By stepping back into clarity. Instead of answering under pressure, use the pause. I need time to think. Those words break the fog. They carve a space where choice can breathe. And in that space you can ask, am I doing this freely? Or because fear, obligation, and guilt have been woven around me like a net? Because true giving comes from freedom, never from force. 31. Divide and conquer. Two friends sit close, sharing trust built over years. And then, quietly, a whisper arrives. Did you hear what they said about you? Be careful. Maybe they're not as loyal as you think. It's small at first, just a seed of doubt. But once planted, it begins to grow. Suspicion creeps in, distance widens, and soon the bond begins to fray. Meanwhile, the whisperer steps closer, offering themselves as the new point of trust. The triangle is complete. This is divide and conquer, an old strategy as ancient as kings and empires, as present as office politics and family feuds. The method is simple. Separate strong allies, isolate them with rumors or half-truths, and then control what remains. In workplaces, a manager may quietly pit employees against each other, fostering rivalry so they never unite in strength. In families, a toxic parent may turn siblings into competitors, ensuring loyalty flows upward, never sideways. And in nations, leaders may inflame divisions between groups, fanning mistrust, so that people fight one another instead of questioning power itself. So how do we defend ourselves? By keeping channels of trust open. When a whisper reaches your ear, check both sides. Ask directly. Seek the voice of the one spoken about, because rumors thrive in the dark. But when light shines between people, the seeds of division cannot take root. Divide and conquer only works when we forget to look each other in the eye. 30-second groupthink. The boardroom is quiet. A proposal lies on the table. Ambitious, risky, perhaps even reckless. Around the room, eyes shift uneasily. Someone notices the flaws, another senses the danger, but no one speaks. One by one, heads nod, and silence hardens into consensus. This is groupthink. When the pressure to agree outweighs the courage to dissent, a group becomes blind. Critical voices fade, and poor decisions march forward unchallenged. History holds many examples. Leaders launching wars without questioning the plan. Companies investing billions in doomed projects. Tragedies unfolding because no one dared to break the illusion of agreement. The danger is not malice. It is conformity. The fear of standing out. The subtle belief that if everyone else is silent, perhaps they must be right. And groupthink is not only for boardrooms. It lives in classrooms where students stay quiet despite confusion. It lives in friend circles where no one questions the risky dare. It lives anywhere a group chooses harmony over truth. So how do we defend ourselves? By creating space for dissent. Assign someone the role of devil's advocate, to argue against the majority, to keep the debate alive. or use anonymous votes where silence is no longer mistaken for agreement. Because true unity is not found in nodding heads. It is found when many voices speak, and the truth is strong enough to survive disagreement. 33. Confirmation. Bias reinforcement. You scroll through your feed. Post after post seems to echo your own thoughts. The same opinions, the same outrage, the same affirmations you already hold inside. It feels comforting, as if the world agrees with you, as if your perspective is the common truth. But beneath that comfort, a trap is tightening. This is confirmation bias reinforcement. Our minds already prefer to notice evidence that supports what we believe. But now, algorithms feed that hunger, showing us only the voices, headlines, and images that confirm our view. And so the illusion grows. Everyone thinks like me. Opposing perspectives fade from sight until disagreement feels not just foreign, but impossible. Marketers exploit this subtly. If you click once on a product, you're flooded with ads that echo your good taste. Your purchase feels validated, not challenged. In relationships, the effect narrows trust. Two people in conflict search only for advice that confirms their side, deepening the divide instead of building a bridge. And at the level of society, this bias can fracture entire nations. Communities split into echo chambers, each convinced the other side is blind or delusional. Polarization hardens, not because truth is so different, but because no one is exposed to the full picture anymore. So how do we defend ourselves? By choosing to step outside the echo. Seek out the counterpoint. Read the article that disagrees with you. Follow a voice you would normally dismiss. Think of it as a vaccine, a deliberate dose of contradiction that keeps your perspective healthy. Because truth does not live inside the warm chamber of agreement. It lives where ideas collide, and the strongest ones survive the impact. 34. Illusion of choice. You sit down at a restaurant. The menu arrives, pages filled with options: steak, pasta, seafood, salads. It feels abundant, almost overwhelming. But what you don't see is the invisible hand that designed the menu. The placement of dishes, the prices arranged to guide your eye. The options crafted to funnel you toward the real choice they want you to make. This is the illusion of choice. It feels like freedom, but the path is already carved. Marketers thrive on this. Phone plans that differ in small, confusing ways, but all lead you toward the mid-tier, best value political systems that offer multiple parties, yet all orbit the same structures of power. Even daily life is shaped this way. The apps on your phone, the news you are shown, the paths on which you are asked to walk. Relationships can carry this illusion too. A manipulator may ask, "Do you want to talk now or later?" It feels like you have a say, but the frame hides the deeper choice. Do I want this conversation at all? The trick works because the human mind craves agency. We want to feel in control, to believe we are the ones steering. And so, as long as the cage has two doors, we forget it is still a cage. So how do we defend ourselves? By asking the question behind the frame. Are these the only options? What lies outside this menu? Because true freedom is not choosing between paths already laid out for you. It is remembering you can step off the path entirely. 35. False consensus effect. At a party, someone passes you a drink. When you hesitate, they smile and insist, "Come on, everyone's having one." You glance around. A few people hold glasses, but not everyone. Still, the words carry weight. You feel the pressure to agree, to avoid standing out. This is the false consensus effect. Our minds often assume that our own beliefs and behaviors are more common than they really are, and manipulators exploit this bias, claiming a majority where none exists. Marketers use it all the time. Most people choose this plan. Bestseller, trusted by millions. Whether or not the numbers are real, the suggestion itself pulls you closer to compliance. In relationships, it takes subtler forms. Everybody argues like this. It's normal. All couples go through this kind of jealousy. The exaggeration quiets your doubts, making dysfunction feel universal. On the societal stage, the false consensus effect becomes a weapon. Propaganda repeats, everyone supports this policy. Real citizens stand together. And when dissenters believe they are alone, they fall silent, allowing the illusion of consensus to harden into reality. So how do we defend ourselves? By seeking numbers, not slogans. Independent evidence, not claims of everyone. Ask, is this truly widespread or just made to sound that way? Because truth is not decided by how loudly it is declared. And sometimes, everyone is just one voice, echoed until it drowns the rest. 36. Spiral of silence. In a meeting, a bold new policy is announced. Around the table, heads nod in agreement. Inside, you feel doubt. You see the risks, the flaws. But as your turn to speak approaches, a tension rises in your chest. What if they laugh? What if you're the only one who disagrees? The fear of isolation weighs heavier than the need for truth. So you stay silent, and so does the next person, and the next, until silence itself becomes agreement. This is the spiral of silence. When minority opinions go unspoken, they appear not to exist at all, and the more invisible they become, the less likely anyone else is to voice them. The cycle feeds itself, erasing perspectives not by argument, but by absence. We see it in workplaces, where junior staff remain quiet while flawed projects move forward. We see it in families, where sensitive truths are buried because no one else talks about it. And on the scale of nations, the spiral of silence allows unjust policies to stand unchallenged, as dissenters hide their voices, believing they are alone. But history shows, once one person breaks the silence, others find the courage to follow. And what seemed like consensus was only fear, layered upon fear. So how do we defend ourselves? By building safe spaces for dissent, anonymous surveys, private feedback, trusted circles where truth can be spoken without punishment. And by remembering, silence is not neutrality. It is often the shadow of fear, because the spiral only tightens if no one dares to speak. And sometimes, a single voice is enough to remind others they are not alone. 37. Overton window. A politician steps onto the stage and announces an idea so extreme, so outrageous, that the audience gasps. It seems unthinkable. No one could possibly agree. But then, in the weeks that follow, commentators begin to debate it, not to support it outright, but simply to discuss. Articles appear, is this idea really so impossible? Slowly, the shock dulls. The unthinkable becomes merely radical. The radical becomes controversial. And eventually, the once unacceptable stands at the center of the table, disguised as reasonable compromise. This is the Overton window, the shifting range of what society considers acceptable. Push the window far enough with extremes, and what once seemed outrageous begins to feel ordinary. Marketers use this trick too. They release a product at an absurdly high price. When the discounted version appears, people rush to buy, grateful for the moderation, even though the price remains steep. In relationships, a manipulator may propose something harsh, a demand, a rule, a punishment. When you resist, they soften it slightly and you accept, forgetting that your original standard was far healthier. So how do we defend ourselves? By remembering the baseline. When a new idea is presented, ask, what was the standard before this? Has the frame shifted to make me forget my original ground? Because change is not always progress. Sometimes it is simply the art of moving the window until we forget where the wall once stood. 38. Triangulation. Two people stand in tension. A conflict has formed. Misunderstandings, doubts, unspoken words. Instead of addressing each other directly, a third figure steps in. I just thought you should know what they said. They seem upset with you, but don't worry, I can explain. The triangle is drawn, and the manipulator now holds the center. This is triangulation. Rather than letting two people connect honestly, the manipulator inserts themselves, controlling the flow of information, feeding jealousy, seeding mistrust. It happens in toxic relationships. A partner flirts with another, not out of desire, but to spark insecurity and pull tighter control. It happens in families. A parent whispers to one child against the other, turning siblings into rivals, while loyalty points upward. And it happens in workplaces. A manager tells one employee, "You're my favorite, unlike the others," then tells another the same. Division spreads, and the manipulator reigns in the middle. On the scale of politics, triangulation becomes strategy. Leaders pit groups against each other, manufacturing conflict so that power flows back to them as the mediator, the one holding the balance. So how do we defend ourselves? By refusing to play the triangle. When someone delivers a message on another's behalf, go directly to the source. When jealousy is sparked, ask the person involved, not the one in between. Because triangulation thrives in shadows, in whispers carried through a third mouth. But when connection is restored face to face, the triangle collapses and the manipulator loses their grip. 39. Darvo. Deny, attack, reverse, victim, and offender. You finally gather the courage to confront someone. They hurt you through lies, betrayal, or cruelty, and you lay the truth before them. But instead of listening, they snap back, "I never did that." You're twisting the story. That's not what happened. Denial is the first shield, then comes the counterstrike. You're the one who's toxic. You always create drama. The blame ricochets, turning your accusation into their attack. And finally, the reversal. How could you accuse me after all I've done for you? I'm the one being mistreated here. Now the roles are scrambled. They stand in the place of the victim. You, bewildered, are painted as the offender. This is DARVO. Deny, attack, and reverse, victim and offender. A defense strategy so manipulative, it destabilizes truth itself. It appears in abusive relationships, where confrontation is flipped until the victim doubts themselves. It appears in workplaces, when powerful figures deflect accountability by painting whistleblowers as aggressors. And it appears in public life, when leaders, caught in scandal, deny, lash out, and then claim persecution. The genius of Darvo is not in proving innocence, but in exhausting the accuser, turning the spotlight away and clouding the air with confusion. So how do we defend ourselves? By keeping the focus anchored. Record what happened, save messages, write timelines, collect witnesses. And when Darvo unfolds, resist being pulled into the role reversal. Hold steady on the axis of truth. This is what occurred. This is the harm caused because Darvo thrives on distortion. But evidence, calmly held, is the compass that points back to reality. 40. Common enemy. A leader steps before the crowd. Their words strike with fire. They are the reason for your suffering. They threaten your jobs, your safety, your future. Stand together against them. The crowd stirs, hearts pounding in unison. Strangers link arms, not because they trust each other, but because they share a target. This is the common enemy strategy. When fear or anger toward an outside group is amplified, those within a group bond more tightly. The enemy may be real, exaggerated, or entirely invented, but the unity it creates feels tangible, powerful, intoxicating. History is marked with its scars, nations uniting against scapegoats, minorities blamed for crises they did not cause, propaganda painting outsiders as dangerous, while those in power tighten control. In workplaces, a manager may quietly use this tactic too. You know, the other department is holding us back. We'd succeed if it weren't for them. And suddenly, collaboration turns to rivalry, while loyalty bends upward to the manipulator. Even in families or friendships, the wedge appears. Subtle comments that pit us against them, strengthening bonds through division. So how do we defend ourselves? By asking for evidence. What real facts support this supposed threat? Is the danger concrete or only painted in words? Because unity built on truth can heal, but unity built on hatred consumes itself in time. And so, we have seen how groups can be bound not only by trust, but by shared fear. How a common enemy can weld strangers together, sometimes for causes they do not truly understand. But manipulation does not end with emotion or division. When perception itself can be twisted, when memory and attention are turned into tools, the games move even deeper. Meanwhile, let us step into the next chapter, the playground of mind and memory. 41. Baader-Meinhof. You hear a strange new phrase for the first time, maybe in a book or from a friend's lips. It feels unusual, foreign, something you've never noticed before. And then, the very next day, you see it on a billboard. Later, it appears in an article. By the end of the week, it feels as though the word is following you, echoing from every corner of your life. This is the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon, also called the frequency illusion. Once something enters your awareness, your mind tags it as important, and suddenly, your brain begins to filter reality, highlighting every appearance of it while ignoring the thousands of other details passing through unnoticed. It feels uncanny, almost magical, as if the world itself has changed. But in truth, it is perception that has shifted. The thing was always there. Now your mind is simply tuned to it. Marketers lean on this bias effortlessly. Once you search for a car, you begin to see that same model on every street. Once you browse a product, advertising follows you across your screens, strengthening the illusion that the item is everywhere. Even in relationships, the frequency illusion can reinforce manipulation. A partner plants a suggestion. You always forget the little things. And suddenly, every small oversight glows in your memory, while the times you were attentive fade away. So how do we defend ourselves? By reminding ourselves, it is not reality that has changed, only our focus. When something feels like it is everywhere, pause and say, "My brain is filtering." the world is not suddenly different, because attention is not the world itself. It is simply the spotlight, and the stage was always there, whether lit or not. 42. Misinformation effect. You witness an accident on the street. A car swerves, brakes screech, glass shatters. The memory is vivid, sharp in your mind. But later you read a headline. Red car causes crash. You recall the scene again. And now, in your memory, it was indeed a red car. Except it wasn't. It had been blue. This is the misinformation effect. When false details slip in after the fact, they merge with the original memory, reshaping it until the false becomes indistinguishable from the true. Our minds do not store experiences like video recorders. They are more like living stories, retold, rewritten, subtly altered each time. And every outside suggestion, a headline, a comment, a leading question, has the power to bend the tale. The effect is amplified in media. A single distorted headline, repeated across platforms, plants itself deeper than the actual event ever could. Soon, people argue not about what happened, but about the story built around it. In relationships, misinformation can be seeded intentionally. You always said you wanted this, even when you never did. Over time, repetition bends memory until doubt clouds your own recollection. And in courtrooms, this effect has led to wrongful convictions. Witnesses, influenced by suggestive questioning, become certain of details that never truly occurred. So how do we defend ourselves? By returning to the roots. Separate the event from the narrative. Keep records, notes, unedited accounts before outside voices shape them. And when new information enters, pause and ask, is this the memory itself, or just someone else's version layered on top? Because memory is not a fortress. It is a garden, and every word we let in can plant seeds that change its shape. 43. False memory planting. A researcher sits with a child. They ask gently, do you remember the time you got lost in the shopping mall? Your parents were so worried. At first, the child frowns. No, I don't think so. But the question is repeated, softened with details. The mall had bright lights. You cried near the toy store. And slowly, the child begins to picture it, to imagine the scene, until imagination hardens into memory. Soon, they insist, yes, I remember. It really happened, except it never did. This is false memory planting. Through suggestion and repetition, entire events can be manufactured, so vivid and emotional that the mind cannot tell them from truth. Psychologists have demonstrated this power for decades. People can be led to remember being lost, meeting people they never met, even committing acts that never occurred. In relationships, a manipulator might say, you promised me this. You just don't remember. Repeated enough, doubt begins to erode. Certainty. The victim wonders, maybe I did. Maybe I forgot. In courtrooms, suggestive questioning can contaminate testimony. A witness is asked, what color was the man's hat? Implying there was a hat at all. Soon, the hat becomes part of the memory, though it never existed. And on the scale of society, propaganda can plant collective memories. Events everyone remembers that are distorted, exaggerated, or fabricated entirely. A nation can be bound not by what happened, but by what it is led to remember. So how do we defend ourselves? By watching for leading questions. When someone offers details you never provided, pause. Ask yourself, am I recalling or am I being guided? And when dealing with children or witnesses, be especially careful. For suggestion is most powerful where trust is deepest, because memory feels solid, but it is soft clay, and in the wrong hands, it can be reshaped into stories that never were. 44. Mandela effect. You hear someone mention the Berenstain Bears. The name sounds right, familiar. You've seen those books, those cartoons. And yet, when you look again, it's spelled differently. Berenstain. You're certain your memory was correct, and then you discover thousands of others remember it the same way. This is the Mandela effect, a phenomenon where large groups of people share the same false memory. It is named after Nelson Mandela because many once insisted he died in prison in the 1980s, when in fact, he lived and became president of South Africa. The power of the Mandela effect lies in collective certainty. When many voices echo the same memory, our own confidence strengthens. So many people remember this. It must be true. Psychologists suggest it arises from how our minds reconstruct memory, filling gaps with patterns that feel right. Language, culture, and repeated retellings shape those errors into widely shared truths. In popular culture, misquotes are classic examples. Luke, I am your father, was never spoken in Star Wars, but say it, and most will nod, because the false version has been rehearsed, shared, and absorbed more than the real line. The Mandela effect reveals something unsettling. Our memories are not isolated. They are social, blending with the voices of others, shaped as much by repetition as by reality. So how do we defend ourselves? By checking the record. Return to the source. Photographs, transcripts, recordings. Distinguish between what you remember and what is documented, because memory may unite us in error, but truth still leaves traces if we take the time to look. 45. Primacy, recency. You sit in a lecture hall, pen ready, attention sharp. The speaker begins with a striking story and you feel hooked. Minutes pass, details flow, some slipping through like sand. But at the end, the speaker delivers a closing line. Powerful, memorable, and when you leave, those are the two moments you recall most clearly, the beginning and the end. This is the primacy and recency effect. Our minds cling to the first impressions and the final notes, while the middle fades into blur. Advertisers rely on it constantly. The opening image of a commercial seizes attention. The closing slogan lingers long after the screen goes dark. The filler between, often forgotten. In relationships, the same pattern plays out. The first days of romance glow brightly in memory. The final days of parting ache with clarity. But the long middle years, messy, ordinary, real, can be overshadowed by how the story began and how it ended. In decisions, the bias can shape outcomes. The first option presented sets the tone. The last option seems freshest, standing tall against the fading of the middle. Negotiators and salespeople know, if you can't go first, go last. So how do we defend ourselves? By noticing the blind spot in the middle. When weighing choices, deliberately revisit the center. Break information into smaller clusters so the middle gets its own beginning and end. And when recalling experiences, remind yourself, memory highlights the bookends, but truth lives in the whole story. Because life is not only shaped by how things start or how they finish, it is also lived moment by moment in the long stretch between. 46. Inattentional blindness. A group of students are asked to watch a video. Two teams pass basketballs back and forth. The task is simple. Count how many times the ball is passed. Eyes narrow, focus sharpens, numbers tick upward in the mind, and then the video ends. The researcher asks, Did you see the gorilla? Confused silence. On replay, there it is. A person in a gorilla suit strolling across the screen, stopping, pounding their chest, clear as daylight. Yet half the viewers never noticed. This is inattentional blindness. When our attention narrows to one task, we can become blind to everything else, even the absurd standing in plain sight. It is not a flaw in the eyes, but in the filter of awareness. The brain decides what matters and discards the rest. In daily life, this blindness has real cost. Drivers staring at phones miss pedestrians. Doctors focused on one symptom overlook critical signs of another. A parent scanning for danger may miss the quiet joy in their child's face. Manipulators can weaponize this. They draw focus to a spectacle, a scandal, a distraction, while something more important slips by unseen. The louder the spotlight, the darker the shadows behind it. So how do we defend ourselves? By widening the frame. Practice the pause. Every so often stop and sweep your eyes beyond the center. 3 seconds to scan the edges, to breathe, to notice what else is here. Because awareness is not just focus. It is also the gentle art of seeing the periphery, where the unexpected often hides. 47. Change blindness. A man stops you on the street, asking for directions. You begin to explain. But as you speak, 2 people carrying a large door pass between you. For a moment, the man is hidden. When the door moves on, you continue your explanation, not noticing that the man you're speaking to is now a completely different person. This is change blindness. Our eyes may see the shift, but our minds often do not register it, especially when attention is absorbed elsewhere. It feels impossible, yet countless experiments reveal the same truth. We miss even major alterations if they slip in during distraction. In daily life, this blindness shapes perception more than we realize. A sudden change in a conversation, partner's tone goes unnoticed because we're focused on our own words. Updates to contracts or policies slip by because we assume nothing important has changed. Even in relationships, gradual shifts in treatment, kindness replaced with control, can unfold silently because each step seems too small to notice until it's too late. Manipulators rely on this. They change small details slowly, trusting you won't track the drift. Each shift feels minor, but over time the entire reality is altered. By the time you realize, you are standing in a different landscape entirely. So how do we defend ourselves? By cross-checking what truly matters. Distinguish between decoration and essence. What details are crucial and what is mere backdrop? When something changes, pause to ask, is this cosmetic or fundamental? Because change blindness shows us that not every difference is noticed, but the ones that matter most must not be missed. 48. Mere exposure. You walk into a new cafe. Music hums softly in the background, a song you don't particularly notice. A week later you return. The same song is playing. This time it feels oddly pleasant, like an old companion. By the 3rd visit, you catch yourself humming along, smiling without knowing why. This is the mere exposure effect. The more often we encounter something, a face, a song, a brand, an idea, the more familiar, and therefore likable, it becomes. The mind equates repetition with safety. What we know feels less threatening. And so, what is repeated often enough can begin to feel true, even if it is not. Marketers rely on this endlessly. Logos splashed across billboards, songs on repeat in commercials, the same slogans whispered again and again until they sink beneath awareness. In relationships, mere exposure explains subtle bonds. A classmate you never noticed becomes a close friend simply because you see each other every day. Familiarity grows into fondness, but manipulators can use this too. A false claim, repeated often enough, begins to feel real. A toxic partner may say, "You're forgetful, you're selfish, you're nothing without me." And repetition, like a drumbeat, makes the lie feel familiar and thus believable. So how do we defend ourselves? By pausing before we let familiarity guide trust. When something feels comfortable, ask, is it truly valuable? Or just repeat it until it feels safe. Give space to the new, the unfamiliar, the untested, because novelty can reveal truths that repetition hides, because not everything familiar is good, and not everything good is familiar. 49. Spotlight effect. You walk into a room wearing a shirt with a tiny stain. Immediately, heat rises in your cheeks. Everyone must see it, you think. Everyone must be judging. You sit, shifting in your chair, convinced that the eyes of the whole room are fixed on you. But in truth, most people never notice. They are too busy thinking about their own worries, their own imagined spotlights. This is the spotlight effect. We dramatically overestimate how much others notice about us, our mistakes, our flaws, our awkward moments. The truth is, people are usually absorbed in themselves, not in us. The effect can be paralyzing. It makes us fear speaking up, avoiding risk, shrinking from opportunity because we imagine a crowd of critics watching. Marketers sometimes exploit it subtly. Everyone will notice your skin. People are watching your smile. The suggestion feeds our insecurity, and we reach for the product that promises relief. In relationships, the spotlight effect can be manipulated too. A partner might say, "People are talking about how you embarrassed me," even if no one noticed at all. Suddenly, you carry shame that was never really yours. And on the social stage, the spotlight effect can silence voices. We hesitate to protest, to dissent, to try, because we imagine every misstep will be magnified before the world. So how do we defend ourselves? By remembering the simplest truth. Most people are too busy staring at their own reflection in the spotlight to notice ours. When the heat of imagined eyes grows heavy, pause and whisper inwardly, "They are not watching me. They are watching themselves." And in that release, the stage shrinks, the spotlight fades, and you find the freedom to act without the burden of an audience that was never really there. 50. Peak end rule. Think back to a long vacation, days blurred together, mornings at cafes, afternoons wandering streets, moments small and ordinary. But when you recall the trip now, your memory clings to two anchors: the night of breathtaking fireworks over the water and the final sunset as you boarded the plane home. The rest dissolves into haze. This is the peak end rule. Our memories of experiences are shaped not by the total sum of moments, but by the most intense point and the way it all ended. Psychologists discovered this in studies of patients enduring painful procedures. Strangely, they rated the experience as less painful if the very end was made gentler, even if the overall procedure lasted longer. The closing note rewrote the whole song. Marketers and entertainers rely on this rule. Concerts are designed to build to a climax and close with encores that leave you glowing. Theme parks craft the final ride to send visitors home smiling, so that the memory outweighs the exhaustion. In relationships, the rule explains much. A heated fight may be forgiven if it ends with a tender reconciliation. A long friendship may be remembered bitterly if it closes with betrayal. The ending colors the entire story. So how do we defend ourselves? By becoming designers of endings. When closing an important chapter, a meeting, a goodbye, a project, a journey, choose to shape the final note with care. For endings echo in memory far louder than the middle, because in the theater of the mind, the curtain call often matters more than the whole play that came before. And so, we've seen how memory can be bent by peaks, by closures, by illusions of attention. But perception is only one layer of the game. Sooner or later, we are forced to decide. And in these moments, subtle biases tilt the scales, nudging us toward choices we believe are our own. Meanwhile, let us step into the next chapter, the hidden architectures of decision. 51. Gambler's fallacy. The roulette wheel spins, red, 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 5 times in a row. A hush falls over the table, whispers rise, black is due. It has to be black next bets pile high. The wheel spins again and lands once more on red. This is the gambler's fallacy, the belief that past outcomes somehow stack the odds for the next independent event. But in truth, each spin is fresh, each coin flip clean, each throw of dice untouched by what came before. The fallacy thrives in casinos, but its reach stretches into everyday life. I've had nothing but bad luck lately. Things are bound to turn around. Or, I've succeeded so many times, a failure must be coming soon. We lean on imagined balances where none exist. Marketers and betting platforms exploit this instinct. Your streak is ending, time to cash out. Or, one more play, luck is on your side now. The illusion keeps people hooked, chasing a pattern that was never there. Even in relationships, the fallacy whispers, "He's been cruel so many times. Maybe now he'll finally be kind." But past harm does not guarantee future care. Each act, like each spin, is independent. So how do we defend ourselves? By returning to probability, by remembering that each coin flip, each wheel, each decision is its own universe. Past streaks do not bend the present moment, because chance has no memory, and luck is not a ledger keeping score of what you are owed. 52. Hot hand fallacy. The crowd roars. A basketball player has just sunk 3 shots in a row. With each swish, the energy builds. Fans lean forward, whispering the same thought. He's on fire. Give him the ball. He can't. Miss now. The next shot goes up and clangs off the rim. This is the hot hand fallacy, the belief that a streak of success will continue simply because it has begun. In reality, each attempt is independent, influenced more by skill and circumstance than by the momentum of chance. The illusion is powerful in sports and gambling. A roulette player wins twice in a row and feels the universe tipping in their favor. A gambler believes a hot streak will last, when in truth it is only randomness in disguise. But the bias seeps into everyday life too. In business, a company launches 2 hit products, and investors assume the third must succeed as well. In relationships, a partner behaves kindly for a short stretch, and hope swells. This time, they've truly changed. But short-term patterns do not always prove lasting truth. Marketers play on this fallacy by showcasing streaks, best-selling 3 months in a row. The message implies inevitability, as if momentum alone guarantees future success. So how do we defend ourselves? By separating luck from skill. Ask, is this outcome due to real ability, or could it simply be a lucky run? True expertise is steady over time, not just in bursts of heat. because fire burns bright for a moment, but only enduring skill keeps the flame alive. 53. Sunk cost fallacy. You sit in a theater halfway through a dull, dragging movie. The plot is weak, the acting wooden. Part of you wants to leave. But then another thought creeps in. I already paid for the ticket. I should stay and finish so you remain. Not to enjoy, but to justify the cost already lost. This is the sunk cost fallacy, the tendency to let past investment, time, money, effort, dictate present decisions. Even though that investment cannot be recovered, it appears in countless shapes. A gambler keeps playing, chasing the money already gone. A student continues down a career path because they've spent too many years studying to turn back now. A couple stays in a painful relationship, thinking of the years invested instead of the years still ahead. Marketers know this instinct well. Trial subscriptions lure you to invest time. Once you've sunk hours into setting things up, canceling feels like losing more than money. Video games reward grind so that effort itself becomes a trap. You can't walk away because you've already poured too much in. Even leaders and governments fall prey. Wars prolonged, not because victory is near, but because too much has been sacrificed to stop. The past chains the present, and the future is mortgaged to justify it. So how do we defend ourselves? By breaking the chain. Remind yourself, sunk costs equal zero. The money, the hours, the effort, they are already gone. They cannot be reclaimed. When making a decision, ask only, if I were starting fresh today with no past behind me, would I still choose this? Because wisdom is not clinging to losses. It is knowing when to release them, so the weight of yesterday does not sink the choices of tomorrow. 54. Endowment effect. At a yard sale, you set out an old coffee mug. To you, it feels sturdy, familiar, almost charming. When a buyer offers $1, you bristle. $1? This is worth at least $5. But if the same mug sat on another table, you might pass it by without a glance. This is the endowment effect, the bias that makes us value things more highly, simply because we own them. Possession itself inflates worth. Marketers and product designers know this deeply. Free trials, test drives. Try before you buy. Once something feels like it belongs to you, giving it up feels like a loss. And loss, as we know, hurts far more than gain delights. In relationships, the same effect colors judgment. We defend our own ideas as brilliant, yet dismiss the same thought when voiced by another. We cling to partners, friendships, or traditions, not always because they serve us well, but because they are ours. Even in society, this effect shapes policy and politics. People resist reforms, not out of reasoned analysis, but because existing systems feel like possessions, familiar, and therefore more valuable than they may truly be. So how do we defend ourselves? By asking one simple question. If I did not already own this, how much would I actually pay for it? Strip away the glow of ownership and see the object, the idea, the bond, for what it truly is. Because sometimes the greatest weight we carry is not what we need, but what we simply cannot bear to let go. 55. IKEA effect. You spend an afternoon wrestling with wooden boards, tiny screws, and an instruction sheet that seems written in riddles. At last, the bookshelf stands. It wobbles slightly. A corner doesn't quite align. But when you step back, you feel proud. In your eyes, it is worth more than any flawless shelf you could have bought pre-made. This is the IKEA effect. the tendency to overvalue things we build or assemble ourselves. Effort becomes woven into perception of worth. Marketers understand this deeply. Furniture that requires assembly, customizable shoes, build your own burger, restaurants, all thrive because when we invest effort, we feel ownership, and ownership feels like value. In workplaces, the effect can distort judgment. A team may cling to a process they designed, insisting it is better, not because it truly is, but because they poured themselves into it. In relationships, a partner may overvalue a bond simply because of the struggles endured to maintain it. I worked so hard for this. It must be precious. But hardship alone does not guarantee worth. Even in personal growth, we can mistake sweat for success. Hours poured into a project do not always mean the result is excellent, only that it cost us much. So how do we defend ourselves? By separating effort from outcome. When judging value, ask, if I hadn't built this with my own hands, how would I see it? Would I still prize it so highly? Because effort can add meaning, but it does not always add quality. And wisdom lies in seeing clearly whether what you made is truly good or only dear because it carries your fingerprints. 56. Availability heuristic. You watch the evening news. A plane crash fills the screen. Twisted metal, smoke, frantic voices. The images sear into memory. The next day, when booking a flight, a hesitation rises. Flying suddenly feels dangerous, as if the crash looms over every journey. Yet statistically, the drive to the airport is far riskier. This is the availability heuristic. Our minds judge probability based not on actual frequency, but on how easily examples come to mind. The more vivid, recent, or dramatic an event feels, the more we believe it must be common. Marketers lean into this bias. Ads highlight shocking stories. One person who lost everything, one miraculous recovery, so that we believe their product or service is far more impactful than reality shows. In relationships, availability colors perception too. If the last argument was heated, it dominates recall, overshadowing months of peace. Or, after hearing stories of betrayal, a partner's absence feels ominous, not because of evidence, but because those stories are fresh in memory. On the scale of society, the bias can warp collective judgment. A rare but sensational crime dominates headlines, and people believe it is epidemic. Policies are shaped not by statistics, but by the shadows of vivid fear. So how do we defend ourselves? By seeking base rates, the quiet numbers that do not scream in memory. Ask, is this truly frequent or only memorable? Step beyond the vivid anecdote and into the broader pattern. Because memory is a storyteller, not a statistician, and truth is found not in the loudest story, but in the silent weight of the many. 57. Representativeness, heuristic. Imagine you meet a quiet, bookish young man who wears glasses and prefers solitude. Someone asks, is he more likely to be a librarian or a farmer? Most people answer, librarian. It feels right. He fits the image. But statistically, there are far more farmers than librarians. So the odds still favor farmer, no matter how perfectly the stereotype aligns. This is the representativeness heuristic. Our minds leap to conclusions based on resemblance to a prototype, ignoring the base rates, the actual background probabilities. It is a shortcut that feels intuitive, yet often deceives. Marketers rely on it. A product wrapped in green leaves looks healthy, even if it's loaded with sugar. A brand with sleek design feels premium, though the substance inside may be the same. In workplaces, the bias shapes hiring. A candidate looks the part and is assumed to be competent, while someone who doesn't fit the stereotype is overlooked, despite stronger skills. In relationships, appearance and behavior cues trigger the same trap. He dresses sharply, he must be successful. She's spiritual, so she must be kind. We mistake resemblance to a type for evidence of truth. On a societal scale, this heuristic underlies prejudice. People are judged not as individuals, but as representatives of a group. Stereotypes masquerade as probability, fueling bias and injustice. So how do we defend ourselves? By pausing to ask, what is the base rate? How common is this outcome, independent of appearances? What does the data, not the stereotype, say? Because resemblance is not reality, and true judgment requires seeing beyond the mask of what looks typical. 58. Optimism. Bias. Pessimism. Bias. A student looks at an upcoming exam. One voice inside whispers, "It'll be fine. I'll pass easily. Things always work out." Another voice in a different student's mind warns, "I'm doomed. I'll fail no matter what I do. Why even try?" Both students may be wrong, not because of their ability, but because their forecasts are distorted by bias. This is optimism bias and pessimism bias. The first paints the future rosier than reality, making risks feel smaller, making effort feel less urgent. The second casts the future in shadow, magnifying dangers, suffocating hope. Optimism bias can inspire risky behavior, drivers speed, believing accidents happen to others. Investors sink money, convinced markets will rise forever. Partners ignore red flags, assuming love will conquer all. Pessimism bias, on the other hand, can paralyze. Opportunities pass, relationships wither, dreams are abandoned. Not because failure is certain, but because it is assumed. Marketers know how to stoke both. Insurance ads amplify pessimism. Disaster could strike at any moment. Luxury ads stroke optimism. Your best life is just one purchase away. On a societal scale, these biases shape entire movements. A culture high in optimism may ignore looming threats. A culture steeped in pessimism may resist change, believing nothing good can come. So how do we defend ourselves? By balancing the scales. When facing the future, sketch 3 scenarios: the best case, the worst case, and the most likely. Assign real probabilities anchored in evidence. Because the future is neither as bright nor as bleak as bias makes it seem. It is simply unwritten, and clearer when we see it without the tint of rose or shadowed glass. 59. Present bias, hyperbolic discounting. You sit at your desk, resolving to save money. But when lunchtime comes, you splurge on takeout. It's just today, you tell yourself. Later, when planning the future, you imagine disciplined saving, healthy choices, long-term growth. But in the moment, the present self wins. This is present bias, sometimes called hyperbolic discounting. The tendency to overvalue immediate rewards while undervaluing long-term gains. The cookie today feels sweeter than the health of tomorrow. The impulse buy feels lighter than the weight of debt years ahead. We are wired to favor now, even at the cost of later. Marketers exploit this instinct constantly. Buy now, pay later. Limited time offer. The lure of immediate pleasure overrides the rational balance of patience. In relationships, present bias can drive choices too. We chase the thrill of attention, even when it risks long-term trust. Or we avoid difficult conversations today, trading temporary peace for deeper conflicts tomorrow. On the societal scale, present bias fuels crises. Governments postpone hard reforms because the benefits will take years, while the discomfort is immediate. Climate change is the ultimate victim. Short-term comfort outweighs long-term survival. So how do we defend ourselves? By binding the present to the future. Use pre-commitment, automatic savings, scheduled deadlines, structures that lock your choices now to serve the self you will become, and break distant goals into smaller steps so that long-term rewards become visible in the short term. Because the future is built, moment by moment, out of countless todays. And wisdom lies in choosing not only for who you are now, but for the self who will live with the echoes of your choice. 60. Status quo bias. You receive a letter from your bank. It says you could switch accounts, save fees, gain better benefits. The math is clear. The new option is better. And yet, you hesitate. Filling out forms feels tiring. Changing what is already in place feels risky. So you stay. This is the status quo bias, the tendency to favor what already exists, not because it is best, but because it is familiar. The known feels safer than the unknown. Marketers rely on this deeply. Subscription services count on inertia. Free trials turn into paid plans because canceling feels harder than letting things roll on. In workplaces, entire organizations resist innovation, clinging to outdated systems because this is how we've always done it. The cost of change feels heavier than the cost of staying the same, even when reality proves otherwise. In relationships, status quo bias explains why people remain in stagnant or harmful bonds. The fear of the unknown future feels greater than the pain of the familiar present. On a societal scale, status quo bias slows reforms. Policies remain, not from wisdom, but from inertia. And injustice can persist simply because disrupting it feels uncomfortable. So how do we defend ourselves? By asking the reset question. If I were starting from zero today, would I choose this option again? If the answer is no, then staying is not safety. It is stagnation. Because true stability is not clinging to what is familiar, but choosing again and again what truly serves. The world hums with signals. Screens flicker, notifications pulse, timers tick down, voices echo in our ears. We think we are choosing freely, scrolling, clicking, buying, believing. But behind the curtain, new architectures of influence are at work. Psychological games once whispered one-to-one are now woven into the code of our technology, broadcast at scale, reaching into every moment of attention. This is the invisible amplifier, where human bias meets engineered design. NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. Words are never neutral. Some are shaped as commands hidden inside suggestion. You might begin to feel ready now. Others mimic your tone, your gestures, subtle mirroring that breeds trust. Anchors are planted, a touch, a phrase, a sound tied to an emotional state so that later, the trigger brings the feeling rushing back. This is NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, a toolkit of embedded commands, imitation, and emotional anchoring. In skilled hands, it can inspire confidence or healing. In darker hands, it persuades without consent, guiding thought beneath awareness. Defense lies in noticing. When language feels too perfect, too aligned, too gently directive, pause. Ask, am I choosing or being nudged by the frame of their words? Urgency engineering. A banner flashes. Sale ends in 2 hours. A counter ticks down. Only 3 spots left. Scarcity and time pressure collide, creating urgency where none may exist. This is urgency engineering. The tactic hijacks our fear of missing out, pushing us to decide now before clarity can catch up. Used in e-commerce, apps, games, even news cycles, urgency keeps us locked in the present, unable to step back. Defense is simple but hard. Delay. Pause the purchase, the click, the reply. If the opportunity is real, it will remain tomorrow. If not, it was never worth the rush. Subliminal messaging. In the corner of a screen, for a fraction of a second, a word appears, too fast to be consciously read, yet your mind absorbs it. A soundtrack layers whispers beneath the music. An image hides shapes that stir desire or fear. This is subliminal messaging. Influence delivered beneath awareness through hidden visuals, fleeting sounds, or subtle repetition. Though science debates its power, marketers and propagandists still experiment, because even suggestion, layered softly enough, can bend the edges of choice. Defense lies in skepticism. If a message feels oddly persuasive without clear reason, step back. Ask, where did this impulse come from? Is it mine, or was it planted? Mirror algorithm. You search, you click, you scroll, and the system learns what you believe, what you fear, what you already lean toward. Then it feeds it back to you. Again and again. Each article echoes your view. Each video confirms your bias. The mirror deepens until it no longer reflects reality, but only your reflection stretched into a hall of endless agreement. This is the mirror algorithm. Its goal is not truth, but engagement. It amplifies what keeps you watching, even if it narrows your world to a tunnel. Defense requires conscious friction. Seek out disconfirming voices. Step outside the feed. Remember, the world is wider than what the mirror shows. And so, in this chapter, we see how timeless games of the mind are amplified by circuits, screens, and code. Where once persuasion whispered, now it roars. Scaled to billions, hidden in plain sight. We have traveled through 60 games of the mind, from whispered suggestions to collective illusions, from hidden biases to algorithms that mirror our fears. It can feel overwhelming, like the ground itself is shifting, but the path forward does not need to be complicated. It can be held in a few simple questions, a compact map for defense. 3 golden questions. Who is setting the frame? Is this truly my choice, or a window carefully arranged? What anchor is pulling me? Am I measuring value against my own needs, or against a mark placed by another? Whose emotion am I carrying? Is this feeling mine, or has it been primed, planted, or borrowed from the crowd? And with these questions, a practice, just 60 seconds long. Pause, breathe in for 4, hold for 4, release for 6. Then write your core criteria, the ground you stand on. Delay impulse by 24 hours so the fog of persuasion can lift. That is enough. Not to banish every illusion, but to meet them with awareness, to greet them with calm eyes. And so, as we close this journey, let us carry not suspicion, but gentle curiosity. Let us see each trick, each bias, each nudge, not as chains, but as patterns we can notice and step beyond. Because the moment a game is named, its spell is broken, and the mind, once aware, is freer than before. So, while we part ways here, take with you this soft reminder. Every time an unseen hand tries to steer, pause, breathe, and smile. For you now carry the quiet power to notice, to question, to choose,